Okay, thank you all for being back. We are very excited about this next panel. Let me reset a couple of things for you. If you're just into the room now and you have in your folders, they're index cards. We can get them to our moderator to ask our panelists. If you can write any questions on it, we have Amy and Randy who are in the room who will collect those cards and bring them up, and the moderator can work it into the discussion as appropriate. A couple other things just to keep us going on the social media front. Hashtag MSEA Forum 15 on Twitter. Please use that. And then also, if you need to get onto wireless access here in the room, the Calvert House wireless codes, the username and password is DRUM, D-R-U-M, all undercase, lowercase lettering. So, and then finally, all of these sessions, these videos from each panel will be on the MSEA website later today, marylandeducators.org. And with that, I'm very excited about the start of this next panel. In fact, the first 30 minutes of this conversation on testing is going to be with our students, and then we will not take a stand up and walk out break, but we'll just do a quick transition of new panelists at the end of that as we hear from some additional policymakers and thinkers on the issue of testing. To help lead this conversation is our moderator, Mark Steiner. Mark has hosted The Mark Steiner Show since 1993, becoming one of the most recognized voices in Maryland. In 2007, Mark and his nonprofit production company, the Center for Emerging Media, won a Peabody Award for the series Just Words. In May of 2008, Mark brought his show to WEAA 88.9 FM, which is still his broadcast home. Mark also served for a year as the principal of Baltimore's Experimental High School and taught theater for 10 years at the Baltimore School for the Arts. Over the course of the last few months, Mark has already been leading town hall conversations on the issue of testing, so he is a perfect moderator for this discussion. Please welcome Mr. Mark Steiner.
Thank you. I'm just letting you all know as well, we are taping this for later air, this whole next two panels that will be airing on the web and the Steiner Show, just letting you know. First of all, it's a pleasure to do this panel, Student Perspectives on Testing. And several of these students were on a panel that we had in Montgomery County about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, yeah? So let me introduce who's here. I'm making it quick so we can jump right into it. Next to me is Anders Alio, who is a senior in the IB program at Richard Montgomery High School and one of the founding members of the Minority Scholars Program. Next to him, Nicolas Bayon, who is from La Paz, Bolivia, and he's a senior at Walter Johnson High School. Melissa Escobar is next to him. She's a senior at Richard Montgomery High School, where she was also one of the founders of the school's Minority Scholars Program. Ariana Jones is a senior at Clarksburg High School, and she's also part of since ninth grade, of the Minority Scholars Program. And Angie Seliyama is next to her, and she's a senior at Clarksburg High School and has been part of the same program, Scholars Program, since the ninth grade, and good to have you all on this panel. So I want to start by asking you all your thoughts about testing, but since the results of PARCC came out. And we talked last time together when we had this conversation about how the stress of testing, which we'll get to in a bit, but I really want to get your thoughts on what were your reactions when you saw how all of you from Montgomery County saw how Montgomery County did or didn't do on these tests and what they said to you all about testing in the state for yourselves and your fellow students. Ed, why don't you start?
Yeah, well, I guess I can field this question first. So I noticed that we're all seniors here, and we're all seniors in Montgomery County. So I think we all missed PARCC actually by 1 year. So we're.
Aren't you lucky?
And I noticed that that's to the relief of some of our parents and also some of our peers. We are. With that said, we're all we're from the MSA generation. We took the MSA in second grade. We took a test called no, we took was it MapR? No, it was like a preparatory test in second grade. We took MapR, I think, from third grade to eighth grade, just like the MSA. And from what I can understand, the MSA is drastically different from park testing. Sort of the response I've heard, he mentioned the a town hall that we had like a month or a month and a half ago. I attended that town hall, and there were not only some of the students up here, but there were also parents and teachers who have experienced the first sort of implementation of Park. And sort of the overwhelming response is that it's just confusing to the students. So I took some time and I checked out what Park really is, because I realized that I might have to address the question on this panel. And so I just opened up, just very briefly, I opened up like a math section of Park, and just immediately what I saw is that for a third grader who's under a time constraint and it's their first time testing and maybe they haven't like fully realized the gravity of the situation, or maybe they've sort of bought into too much the gravity of the situation, using all of the tools and understanding the format, it must be very difficult. It must just be very, it might be too much to take in as a third grader, even as an 8th grader completing the Park. There are like there's like a toolbar where you can have like a ruler and a protractor. The questions are phrased differently from maybe what you experience as a 1st or 2nd grader. So just as a whole, it might be a sort of overwhelming experience. But I understand that it's like a beta testing. So like it's just like the first sort of implementation of the test. So there are always going to be problems. But from what I understand, speaking from the perspective of someone who hasn't taken the Park, it must be sort of like a difficult endeavor.
Angie?
Actually, I was told that I had to take the Park in order for me to graduate, but like my class was like a guinea pig for it, so it didn't really matter if we passed or not. Our teacher told us, I know it's a hard test, you don't really have to pass it, you just have to take it to graduate. And of course, I want to graduate. So we were given about 15 minutes the day before to get used to the tools on the actual test, and I didn't understand anything. Like, we'd raise our hand, text our teacher, can you help us with this? She was like, I don't even know what it is. And the test itself, like, it had nothing to do with, because I was in Algebra 2 last year, Honors Algebra 2, and it had nothing to do with algebra. Like, it was very difficult. Half of my answers I wrote, I don't know. Because, not just because I didn't know the answer, but I didn't even know how to use the tools on it. So it was a very difficult test, and yeah.
So, what you just said, just for 2 seconds, so when you didn't, so does that mean that the test was testing things from what you saw that you had not been taught in class, or a different way of approaching the subject? What did that mean?
Both. There was things on the test that I've never seen before, and my teacher even said, she was like, yeah, we didn't cover this yet, and I don't even think we will. And there was also
And that was in algebra?
Yeah, Algebra 2.
2, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And the Park test was just general algebra, but I took Honors Algebra 2, and still there was things on the test that I didn't know. And also there was tools there that I didn't know how to use. And I was like, if I need to get a protractor, like I didn't know how to get it. And it was like timed as well. So it was very stressful.
Wow. Melissa, do you want to jump in on that a little bit?
Well, all I have to say, I didn't take it, so I'm not really sure. But I do have a couple friends who took it, and they've told me the same thing that Angie says. It was really hard for them to figure out how to use it, and it was time-consuming, so they were rushed. Most of the things on it, they didn't know how to do it, so it was, as she said, they just put, I don't know, and it was just like to graduate, so they didn't really try either because it was hard for them to do.
So that's interesting. I'm curious about some of the things we talked about last panel, but let me turn first. Nicholas, do you want to say something, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I remember I'm pretty sure it was given over like a couple of days or a week, the Park test, and we were juniors when it happened, and the sophomores unfortunately had to take it, so they had to take that, and they still had to prepare for their HSAs and their final exams. And I really clearly remember the week of the Park test team, because not only were they super stressed, but the teachers were stressed because they were the ones proctoring the exam. So they had to go out of their classrooms, go out of their way of teaching to proctor these exams, that even they had confusing directions on how to time each section. And like, they were stressed because the students you could see their faces while they took the exams, and they apparently were like, I don't know what this like means, like. and that like has an effect on them. Like throughout that week, they just thought like, wow, like they just gave me a test that I had no idea what was going on, and I just feel bad about myself now. So like you could see the faces on all my sophomore friends completely stressed out about this exam because they weren't able to fully answer the questions, and like like I have friends that still get good grades and like they were doing good in their classes, and they're just given this exam, and that's just a complete like blow to their confidence of what they've been learning so far, because then they think that, oh, maybe like I haven't been learning as well as I thought I have.
And Ariana, I know that the last time we spoke on the last panel, you and Angie both spoke, I think, a lot to the siblings and younger people and what you experienced just watching them.
My sister, she last year she was an 8th grader, and she took the PARCC test. She said that like the test was stupid. She said it didn't make any sense. You know, my sister, she's like your average slacker, but gets like a 4.0. So the test like didn't really faze her, but she just said it was stupid, like pointless, like it didn't make any sense. So she didn't understand why she had to take it.
So, okay. I mean, none of us like taking tests, ever. I hated them. We had to do them. I hated giving them, and I hated taking them. Then I had to grade them, and that was even worse sometimes. But when you look at the numbers of students in Montgomery County, where you come from, who met the test, 45%, I think, and I have them all written down here. I was trying to parcel this stuff out. But so what is that? I'm curious what this all says to you about what you think testing ought to be to A, help you all as students, but B, to help people evaluate and understand what is actually happening in the classroom and what students are learning. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's got to be, we all have to have some accountability on some level. So how would you envision it? Angie, I see you got the mic, so why don't you jump?
Yeah, I definitely think that it should be teachers creating these tests, not people who are not in the classroom with us, not people who have no idea how fast we're learning and at what pace. Because when we're given these tests, like it's, I don't know how to put this. It's like we're given these tests from people who don't know. Like, for example, a teacher knows how fast her class is learning. A teacher knows at what pace her students are going to be learning. So a teacher should create the test. So if, for example, if we're taking the PARCC testing and on the PARCC testing, the only thing we know is like half of the test and not the other half. Like, what does that do for us? Because it's not like you can correctly evaluate students when they don't even know what's on the test. It makes no sense. It'd make better sense if you'd evaluate students on things that you know they know. For example, a teacher knows what students knows because she knows that she taught you guys correctly. So yeah.
So let me just push a little bit, push button. All right, you can jump in immediately. So you got the mic in your hand too. So there will be people who will say that if 55% of students in a given jurisdiction are not passing this PARCC test or whatever, and we know numbers of students in different jurisdictions have a real low rate in terms of reading ability and math ability. So what does that say to you in terms of the testing? You know what I'm saying? I mean, how do we, A, understand what students know and don't know in terms of your peer conversations, and how should we better understand that?
I also agree with Angie about how like teachers should be able to make the tests that we take, because the teachers are the only ones who really know what we're going through, like in our class. You know, if we have like a quiz that day, and we tell the teacher like we do not know what's going on, blah blah. The teacher can take another day, you know, and give us more resources on how we can learn it better. But you know, when you take these final exams and all this stuff, it's that day. If you don't take it that day, you fail. And I think that if that's how we're doing it, then all students are just going to do is fail. And 55% of students not passing the PARCC should tell them something that, A, we need to change what we're teaching, or change when we take these tests, change how we take these tests. You know, we shouldn't have this many people failing a test, and then, you know, it counts for something.
Melissa, oh, go ahead. I guess we're going down the road. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to comment too on the fact of the language barrier. I know that was a big thing for my little cousins. They're in middle school and they took it and they just came. So it was really hard and they forced them to take it too. And it was really hard for them because they don't know English and they had to take it. So obviously they had no idea what was going on in the test. So they couldn't do it. And that also adds to the reason why the percentage of passing the test is so low.
So we had a question in the audience. And folks, by the way, you have these index cards. Please throw your questions out there, this panel and next panel, and we'll read them as they come through, as many as we can. Somebody wrote in here from the audience, are students aware that many of these tests are used to grade their schools? And if so, do they think this is valid accountability? Go ahead, Nicholas.
Yeah, well, here's the other thing that I think about with the tests, because the tests are also grading like the teacher's ability, well, like they think they're grading the teacher's ability and based on the classes, which is why a lot of teachers always try to remember what was given on the test the year before. And I just think that's counterproductive because then they end up having to teach structured based on the tests, and that just really like structures, like it prevents them from teaching what they want to teach and teaching with their freedom. That's just going to hold them down more, and they have to teach geared towards these tests, and that's just going to make it harder for the students as well as for the teachers, because then the students have to learn very structuredly and not as openly as they can be learning, which makes it easy for them, and the teachers the same thing. So then the teachers and students are both graded based on these tests that really just like hold down learning.
Yeah, I'd like to say two things in regard to that question. First of all, I think it's just not. I think everyone in this room recognizes that it's not as cut and dry as a school gets a high grade, therefore it's a good school, or a school gets a poor grade and therefore it's a poor school. That's just one indicator, and even MCPS or the county that we come from, Montgomery County Public Schools, even they recognize that because that's only one of the indicators that they use. They also use AP testing or number of students that take APs. They also use number of students who succeed in HSAs. They use number of students who take higher level math courses like Algebra 2 and Calculus. So there's that.
Huh.
Also, there's also like a distinction between schools that are in wealthier areas in Maryland and also schools that are in poor regions. And that disparity is not only like a wealth disparity, but in my opinion, it's also sort of like a preparedness disparity because students who come from typically wealthier regions, they're generally more prepared for these tests because they have the resources around them to prepare them. I work at a tutoring center called Kumon in my hometown of Rockville. It's like a place where students go to really brush up on their math and reading skills in this sort of like really rigorous way. And the children there, they're disproportionately white and Asian students, and they live in that sort of area of Rockville, which is wealthier than other parts of Montgomery County. And they're, like, from what I see from the material that they're learning from, they're very, very well prepared for the things that they might encounter in a PARCC test or any sort of test similar to that. So I think if we're going to address the problem of schools being graded by their test scores, we have to also address the problem of the fact that schools that encounter lower performances, that's because their students are less prepared because they don't come from backgrounds where they have that really rock solid foundation of I'm going to Kumon, I'm going to brush up on my math and reading skills every day from 4 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon after school. So that's definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration, in my opinion.
So, go ahead, Melissa.
I was also thinking about knowledge about like the students knowing that there's going to be, like, for example, I didn't know there was an SAT until I went into high school, and I could have prepared in my in middle school or something, but I didn't know that there was such a thing to do. So that also affected me because I didn't have enough knowledge, and that's not me. It's also a lot more people who go through that. Also, as Andrew said, the poverty, we really have to focus on poverty too, because with the classes, I know there's SAT classes and there's other things that you can take, like you can get tutored. A lot of people don't have access to that, and most of those classes have a minimum of 300 points that you can get more on the SAT, and that affects other students because then they don't have that chance to get those points.
So very quickly, I'm going to get to some of these questions that just came in here at the time we have. But the last panel we did, there was a parent that stood up that pulled her children out of the test. Remember, and when she said they opted out, there was this kind of round of applause from all the teachers and everybody else and parents in the room. So I'm just curious, what students talk about in that regard, and what do you think about the idea of people opting out? Just curious.
I personally think that's a great idea. If I knew I didn't have to take some of these tests, I probably would be a lot less stressed. I probably would have a few better grades in my classes, and I'd just probably be a happier person. I feel like tests, the tests that you take, some of these tests, they tell you like, oh, it doesn't matter. But then when you realize that you take the test and then next year your classes you're like in the lower portion, like you're the lower classes, the not on level classes anymore, then you like realize, oh, that test really did matter. Like it really did matter. And I didn't try, or I was too stressed out about it, or I just couldn't get a good grade on it. And like if I could have opted out of taking those tests, I probably would have started off in high school a lot higher than I was, and I had to move myself up personally instead of already being there.
Any other quick thoughts on that before we have another question here from the audience? Angie, go ahead.
Yeah, just touching on what Ariana said, I feel like by all these tests that are given to us, they really make you feel insecure. For example, I have two younger sisters. Last year, one of my younger sisters was in the 5th grade, and she had to take the PARCC testing and the MSAs and all that. And I've never seen a 5th grader stress like she was stressing. It was crazy. Like she was like, I have to get a good night's sleep. If I don't get a good grade, then I'm gonna be dumb. And I don't think that's fair for a child of her age to feel that way. And also, by giving students all these, I feel like these tests are unnecessary and making them feel dumb. That's taking kids out of school. What's our future looking like? Because now teachers don't want to teach anymore because all they're basically doing is just giving students information so they can memorize it, because we're not learning. Because everything we do in school, I could easily do it at home on my phone. If I wanted to learn about math, I could just go on YouTube and learn about math. Because in school, I'm not doing that. I'm just memorizing. I don't even know what I learned in math last week because I took a test, so I forgot about it. So it's really not, like, our workforce is going to be so small when we get in the future because there's nobody in school anymore, and there's nobody to quote unquote teach us anymore because nobody wants to be in school because there's too many tests and there's too much stress, and it makes you feel like you're dumb, you're worthless. And then these teachers, they're like, I'm not even teaching these kids. I'm just throwing them information so they can take a test, so they can pass it, so that they can move on to the next grade level.
This audience member who asked this question, thanking all of you for sharing your experiences, one of the questions they had here was, one of the explanations we have heard to justify low PARCC scores is that students didn't try because they were told the grades wouldn't count. Is that your experience? Or is that the experience, I know most of you didn't take the PARCC, is that the experience of most people around you that you talk to when you sit and talk about these tests?
That was my experience for sure. I did not try on that test. I mean, I usually when teachers tell me, oh, you know, you just have to take it to pass, I kind of tell myself, Angie, you got to do good. But when I got there, I was, feeling confident in myself, like, yeah, you got this. It's just another MSA, like, whatever. I opened the computer. It took me forever to log in because that login process was, I don't even know. And I just got there and I was like, what is this? And then, like, at first I was like, maybe it's just because you probably didn't pay attention in class. But then when you start hearing, like, the whispers around the room, like, what is this? When did we learn this? And then you're like, okay, it's not just me. And then you just kind of give up, and then you just write, I don't know. So
Nicholas?
Yeah, from what I heard from my peers that did take the test, that like most of them were going to try, and they were like, whatever, like let's just see how I do on this. And then as soon as they opened up the test, as soon as they logged on, they were like, okay, well, there goes trying. It doesn't count anyway, and I already have like other things to worry about because of school. So if this doesn't count, I might as well focus on the things that are going to be graded in the future. And I also wanted to touch on the point about mental health, because counselors at my school and the principal and everyone have really realized the amount of stress that I go to Walter Johnson High School in Bethesda. It is a hugely competitive school, and it's only getting more competitive. So the amount of stress that my peers go through is immense. We had a student, I don't like to touch about this, but he unfortunately committed suicide last year because of stress-related causes. And we have implemented a new program at our school called Sources of Strength. And we have a new texting hotline because we don't really like call anymore. So you can text that hotline at any time, and it's like and it's people that just like are there to like hear you out, because there's been a huge increase in stress, and we really do need to focus on the things of mental health, because students are being impacted, and mental health needs to be realized and implemented more throughout schools.
So one of the questions here as well, there's a lot of questions here. I'm going to try to get to as many of these as I can before we run out of time. Somewhere when beyond actually taking the test, will you talk about, one, how many of those classes, how many other classes you missed to take the tests? Two, how often your teacher was out of class to give tests to other students? And C, how often you could not be in the media center because of tests?
So for the park test, I know I had 3 teachers who all had to give tests. So I missed a few like learning days because my teachers were out. And then we had a sub. You know, the subs don't do anything. They don't know what they're talking about. So, you know, you miss out on like a few learning days. All of the labs at our school were taken up. So like at lunch, you couldn't use the lab. So if you had to do a essay or project or something, you couldn't finish it. And the tests were like 2 or 3 weeks. So that's a whole 3 weeks that someone could be missing out on their classes, missing out on their teacher time, missing out on their lab time. And I don't think it's fair to use up all of our resources for a test that quote unquote doesn't matter.
So let me just jump to right here for a moment, to come right back to you.
I can address another question. It's fine.
Fine.
Yeah.
Angie, go ahead.
So
Very
I
magnanimous.
think
Thank you.
the first day for park, I missed every class, like the first half, so up until 4th period. And then the rest of that day, none of my teachers were in class. I had subs. And then for those next 2 weeks, I think it was like on average, like 3 or 4 teachers were missing. So, and during that time, we were doing final exam stuff. So it was like you couldn't really prepare for final exams because your teacher wasn't in class.
So I am going to really turn this to the audience. There's so many interesting questions here. It's hard to see which ones to pick from. But let me try here. I should combine some of these because it might fit together. Somebody wants to know, are AP and IB tests useful? If so, what makes them more useful than PARCC?
So coming from like a mainly AP and IB background in my high school education, I can definitely speak to this because sort of like the textbook distinction that the AP and the IB programs would make would be that AP and IB focus on college preparedness, whereas PARCC is more like a it's like someone mentioned before, like a grading standard for schools in determining how well their students are performing, just on a general level. I don't think I'm in a position to say which one is more important than the other. They're both very important because we need to know, there needs to be some sort of indicator of how well primary and secondary level education, like students are performing. And AP and IB tests are useful in their own way, but there's a time for each. So I think that PARCC testing is useful in its own in its own time period, that third to 8th grade time period. And I'll pause before I say it's useful because I'm not sure how useful it really is compared to like the MSA testing. But like an indication test of how well students are performing, that's definitely useful. But AP and IB tests, they go like above and beyond sort of like the normal curriculum, the normal things that you'd learn in the classroom. And I think especially we all come from the Minority Scholars Program. Especially among minorities, there needs to be like a particular emphasis placed on AP and IB, not only testing but just that sort of method of conceptualization, like that mode of learning, because it does help with college preparedness. I think that's I can speak to that because my writing has improved. The way I think about certain mathematical concepts, that's improved too in my time as an AP and IB student. So it's hard to, like I said, nothing is very cut and dry. It's hard to say whether one is more useful than the other because they're both useful in their own sort of spheres. But AP and IB tests, I will say, are especially useful to the students who go into the rigorous, not only college applicant pool, but also workforce, and who need those skills of like a different kind of conceptualization and ways of learning.
So we only have a few minutes left in this panel, so let me, as we close this out, and I know, Melissa, you look like you want to say something, as does Nicholas, on this, but maybe we can, and then go down the line and maybe just have really quick closing thoughts that you want to leave folks with before we end the panel. Okay, Melissa, why don't you start?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, you can, and then we'll go to Melissa.
Okay.
Either way.
Okay.
Nicholas, go ahead.
I just wanted to touch really briefly on the previous question. I do think AP tests are useful because of the college preparedness and they help you get credits, but I really wanted to focus on the accessibility of those because they're getting more expensive every year, and I'm pretty sure last year they were like $80 a test. So if I took 3 AP courses last year, so that's a lot of money, and there's people that take 5 or 6 AP courses, and the accessibility of that towards minorities or people of lower income, which are most likely usually minorities, that's just not fair. And then closing thoughts, I really think we're getting towards, we're working towards a good cause, and more and more we're going to be able to like have students, like hopefully, like for example, like I don't know, in 20 years or something, when I have kids and I'll come home and I'll be like, how was school? They'll be able to tell me it was really good, even though I learned things that for me personally, I'm not going to pursue them. They were really interesting, and I learned a lot, and I want to continue to learn because I really think we've lost the want to learn, and I really think we need to regain it.
And very quickly, down the line, really quickly, Melissa Escobar, then we'll go down.
Okay, so basically just saying before, I had the privilege to take an IB test. I took some classes, and I really liked it because it was less stressful and it was more time and it was more open-minded questions. I think that gave me the privilege to actually focus and know what I was going to test. The class itself was more open, and I just really enjoyed the IB. I took Anthro, IB, Social Anthro. So it was really nice. I loved it. Closing thoughts, I think that we should focus also on poverty issues and on socioeconomic issues because that also affects the privilege and the knowledge that some students can receive, and it will help improve our grades and our testing grades too. So yeah.
So to talk about the AP test for a little bit,
Just a second, we're
Yeah.
out of time here.
the AP tests I feel like are definitely more important. You study harder for those, but I feel like if you pass it, you get your college credit, and that they're a little more important. And then my closing thoughts are, I hope that eventually students won't be looked as data points. They'll be looked as students who are in the classrooms. Who will look at students who are in the classrooms trying to learn, trying to get a higher education, and that these testing experiences will be a lot better in the future.
Same as what Nick said. We need to bring back the want to learn because we're not learning, we're memorizing, and we're just memorizing for some data points that really don't even affect us. Our future is not looking bright. We're not going to have a lot of people in the workforce. We're not going to have the next president dreams could have been crushed because they got a basic on the MSAs. We really need to think about what these tests are doing to kids because they're not helping us, they're crushing us. So yeah, that's my
All right,
closing thought.
this has been really a phenomenal panel, I say. But you know your name, and you're fine. And it just leave you this thought that I just got a note here from one of my producers who's here, who was an honor student and an ace, and she said, the only way I was able to take the AP tests is because my high school subsidized them on a certain amount based on students' quarterly grades. So A's got you $20 off and so on, but it was still a big financial burden for my parents. Something to think about when we talk about how we teach and test our children as we go to our next panel. Thank you. You guys are great and make me feel good about where we're going next. Thank you all so much.
Pretty awesome. Thank you.
You were great.
Well, Mark Stein.